Hey, this is producer Jess for the Hopecast. On today's show, we are going to re-air a classic episode that Rachael recorded back in June of 2022. This program received such a great response that we thought we would air it once again. We have titled this show, When is Too Much Enough?
Hello and welcome to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Rachael is a speaker, inspirational author, and an overcomer. As Rachael is walking through her own journey of grief, she's challenging others to persevere and overcome their own circumstances. Find out more at rachaelflick.com. Here now is your host, Rachael Flick.
Hi friend, welcome to this week's episode of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. I'm so grateful that you're here and I love that you're listening, and I really hope that the message today encourages you and inspires you for post-traumatic growth and resilience in your own life, for your own hope story. And as a hope peddler, that is my heart for this podcast. And so today I'm going to talk to you about compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is a feeling of overwhelm and shutting down when we're exposed to too many traumatic events too close together. So in my own life right now, my sister-in-law, Micah's big sister, Chantel, had a heart attack a week ago on Wednesday. And it was a catastrophic heart attack. She's 40. She's really healthy, like almost annoyingly healthy, you guys. Like this woman lives on tea cleanses and super greens and vitamins and, Burka water, and just is very intentional with everything she puts in her body and has in her home and the cleaning products that she uses. And so when I got the call last Wednesday that she was having chest pain, difficulty breathing, I thought, well, maybe she's having a panic attack. And then shortly after that, we got the call that the paramedics had been called, and it wasn't a panic attack. She was having a heart attack. And so instantly the mood changed very quickly. She was taken by ambulance to the hospital and quickly taken to the cath lab, where they work to support the heart in a temporary fashion by putting stents in it that allow the blood flow to come through the heart despite the damage from the heart attack. And they were able to stent one of the valves, but another valve they could not stabilize at all. And so she was very unstable. The surgeon said, we want to take her up to Denver, where they have this really high level ICU and we can do open heart surgery. But she was not stable enough, which was really scary. So they take her to another local hospital where they're able to put her on a system called ECMO, which is a bypass machine that does the work of the heart and the lungs. She was completely intubated. She was sedated. And after we get to this next hospital and the surgeon comes out and gives the report, he says, guys, it's the worst of the worst. It's completely statistically unusual for a 40-year-old woman in her condition with no risk factors who lives a healthy life to have a heart attack like this. And so her heart is no longer viable. It was literally destroyed by the heart attack, and she is on 100% life support, and we still have to get her up to Denver. So that night they stabilized her and they drove her up to Anschutz, which is a very high-end hospital. It's got 8 ICU departments that are very specialized and high-level teams, transplant teams. And I mean, we are given terrible prognoses. Like, our emotions are through the roof. We know that Chantel's life is hanging in the balance at this point. She has no chance on her own without the supernatural intervention of God. And they're telling us that her lungs have been so damaged because whenever you have a heart attack, the body floods the lungs with fluid, that her lungs had to be healthy enough in order to even consider a transplant. So we should expect for her to be on this ECMO machine in cardiac ICU for 6 weeks. And then, I mean, the presence of God, like the prayers that are happening, the people who rally around us. I mean, there are things that the surgeons have said, miracle. They just keep saying miracle. And you can tell it's reluctant because that's not their framework. That's not their perspective on life. But the next day, they do an x-ray of Chantel's lungs, and they're clear. Like, she is good to go. And then you have to do this whole antibody testing because she needs a heart transplant, which was terrifying. The idea that this healthy mom, we'd spent Mother's Day together 10 days before this, playing with the kids, swimming, hanging out. Chantel had made some healthy dessert for us. And now we are looking at a life and death situation where she needs a heart transplant. And people can be on the transplant list for months and years. They can die waiting for a transplant. So they do this test for antibodies, and Chantel has had 4 pregnancies. And so every time a woman is pregnant, her body perceives threats from other people that come into their own environment, and the body will create an antibody to them. And so after having 4 pregnancies, the surgeon told us to expect that her donor pool would be really small because she probably had a lot of antibodies. The surgeon comes back the next day and says, Chantel's body has 0 disqualifying antibodies to any donor. So as long as they are a type match and are appropriate for her body, as long as they line up on these other factors, she can have any heart. I mean, the roller coaster of emotions was just stunning. It was like we couldn't catch our breath. We're spending 16, 18 hours a day at the hospital, sleeping in a hotel across the street from the hospital, on call, receiving text messages through the night if we left. And so the next day, Saturday night, they say, we have a heart. And the transplant surgeon told us later she didn't sleep all night long reviewing donor offers for Chantel to give her the best possible chance. And so it's Saturday evening, and then it ends up getting pushed to Sunday night. I mean, we are, like I've said, on this roller coaster. We're riding the waves, seeing her in ICU in the intensity of this crisis, intubated, struggling. She woke up not knowing what had happened to her. She was scared in that place, feeling the feelings of the families and the tears, and just being fully connected to everything that's happening moment by moment. So they start the heart transplant at 11:30. We're giving updates. We're told, 4 to 8 hours is a normal amount of surgery. It could be 12. You just don't know what's going to happen when you're in there, and to kind of prepare for anything. And so we did. And I believe that Chantel was right in that 4-hour mark. I mean, I just remember them coming out and saying, the heart is in, it's beating, they're closing her up. I wanted to cry. I can't even talk to you about how powerful that report from the doctors was. We're all hugging each other. I'd done a couple news interviews that morning because there's a GoFundMe for Chantel, and I will link that in this podcast just because there's going to be so many needs that are still ongoing for the family, and major house renovations that they've said need to happen for lessening the chance of infection for Chantel when she goes home from the hospital, which they've told us to expect still to be weeks out in the future from when I'm recording this podcast right now in May. So we get this news, we're with her. The 4 hours after surgery are incredibly tenuous and uncertain. We're just sitting there, and I can tell you, I felt, it was just like my limbs were radiating. I felt numb. I felt stunned. I felt in shock. I felt, the whole family, we've all lost Micah, right? We know what it is to have the death of someone very precious to us. Chantel has 3 young children. My kids are feeling the feelings of what happens if we lose our aunt, and, asking the questions that all of us are thinking, how could God let this happen again in this family? Because statistically, Chantel shouldn't be alive. The type of heart attack she had was called a widowmaker. So part of her heart was completely occluded, which means blocked off. And then she had what's called SCAD, so spontaneous coronary aortic dissection. And so basically her heart ripped in 2 places from the aorta down. And there's really no medical explanation for how She made it through to the paramedics getting her the time to the cath lab before she got help, before she was on life support. And she never lost consciousness. Like, that's incredible in and of itself. Like, there's miracle after miracle within Chantel's story, and it's only been 7 days. And so I'm telling you all of this because I want to talk about what compassion fatigue really looks like in the human person. And a lot of times we talk about compassion fatigue within the professional community, because I could sit with, 4, 6, 8 people a day, and I could hear the most horrible, life threatening stories that you can imagine. And first responders go from trauma to trauma. They are always with people having the worst day of their lives. That's always where they are. And so you're just in this intensity for so long. And so as humans, we're not made to have this level of intensity like what we've been going through with Chantel for a week. Like, we can't do that forever, right? Like, we can't maintain, like, oh, I only slept a few crummy hours in that hotel bed. I lived on hospital food, and, my kids are crying with me on FaceTime because they're stressed. Like, that's not maintainable, right? Just the cortisol, the adrenaline, the pressure on the body to show up, to think clearly, to support one another, that's not sustainable. And neither is it when you look at, so here's a personal example from my family, and then you have this professional example for first responders or trauma therapists, counselors. And then I'm going to pull back and do a big picture view, right? So since 2020, we have all been in a state of uncertainty, crisis, unknown. We have lost what we know to be normal. We lost support systems. We were put in unusual forms of stress. We were not allowed to be with loved ones that comfort us. And I know for myself, so I lost Micah in 2018, and I just had his second year anniversary in February of 2020. And I had gone on this amazing widows retreat in the very first week of March 2020 before the lockdown. And I was like, okay, great. Like, I feel filled up. I'm so grateful. Like, I really want to start implementing like new rhythms in my life. I want to, do things with purpose, and just start to build new expectations and rhythms. And then in the middle of March, we're safer at home, right? I'm back with all of you, most of you, unless you were an essential worker, in my sweats on my couch. And let me tell you, that's what grief feels like, is isolation, stress, fear, uncertainty. You're not in your normal routines. You're not getting out of your house. In grief, a lot of times you might stay in bed for the day. You might not shower. You just have unusual rhythms and patterns, and the things that give you life, that fill your cup, are not happening. And so my own therapy became online, which is a very different form of connection. I couldn't do things that were great for my body. My gym closed. There was no massage. Like, I'm not seeing my friends. We're all doing those like wine dates or whatever we were doing. Like, oh, I'll meet you on Zoom at 7 o'clock and I'll pour my own, cocktail and we'll hang out or whatever. And we all know that we really realize through that the power of human connection, the power that something simple like a baby shower has, or a high school graduation, or things that I know I took for granted that are human connection, that are rhythms, that are celebrations of life. Those all went away. And so we had this year, and not only that, but then we don't know what COVID does, right? Like, we're kind of all afraid that we're going to die, that it's going to be this mass loss of life. And, personally lost several friends and family members from complications to COVID. My dad has Alzheimer's. He got COVID. That was a comorbidity. It slid him down the scale, like 3 or 4 points of the 7 levels on the ladder of kind of descent into the dementia disease process. So I don't say this with any form of lightness or like, oh, it didn't affect me, it wasn't bad. And I'm just saying to you, like, we thought that maybe all of us were just, going to die. And that level of fear and terror was kind of hanging over the nation. I mean, just going to the grocery store was incredibly stressful to see people not behaving in their usual norms, not making eye contact or smiling at each other. You can't see people's faces. We're all wearing masks. Like everything has changed. And that was very depleting, fearful, discouraging. The news cycle was terrible. There was a lot of money to be made on people's fear. That was, a death toll on CNN being updated every day. So then we hit 2021, right? And now we're trying to figure out, like, is normal coming back? Is COVID forever? We have all these variants. Where are we going to go from this? And then we tried to step back into life, right? We tried to go back to church. We tried to figure out, like, oh, we can, do self-care things, but we all have to wear masks and there's going to be plastic shields between everyone. And there can only be 2 people in the office, or whatever things that we created to try to distance ourselves from one another. And that in and of itself was stressful, right? And then now we've hit 2022 and it's like, okay, well, we kind of have these rhythms established from COVID. We know how we're going to handle it. We know whether we decided to get vaccinated or not, who had it, who didn't, who's more likely to be affected. Like we kind of have some expectations, beliefs. It's not a complete unknown like it was to us in 2020. And so in the space of that, I read a statistic today that said that since the beginning of 2022, we have had 200 mass shootings. The rioting that happened in 2020, the massive national uncertainty, the conversations around race, around education, just really kind of unearthing what is the underbelly of the American society, which in and of itself is a lack of norm, is causing us to look inside of ourselves in a new way, is asking more of us than we've ever had to give in our known lifetime, right? This isn't new to humanity. It's new to us. It's new to our 100-year generation, but it's not new to what it is to be human or to live in the real world. And so in the last week, we had the shooting in Buffalo, New York, that was racially motivated and 10 Black people were killed. And so we're, bringing that into the racial conversation. And then 2 days ago, we had the Uvalde shooting of the children in the school. And I bring all of these things up to say, the Flick family, we're right here. So we lost Micah in 2018. We've gone through the pandemic with all of you. And now we are having a personal family crisis with Chantel, who has a new heart and is now on this road of cardiac rehab and everything that's happening. And I will be honest with you and say that when I saw the Uvalde shooting news, I shut down. I was like, nope, can't do it. Haven't slept. My kids are having meltdowns. The family children are having meltdowns. The family's having meltdowns. We are in Chantel's hospital room hour by hour, day to day. We never know what the doctor is going to say next. I can't do it. And that is a great example of compassion fatigue, right? Like, I have nothing to offer. There's nothing I can give to this. I myself am on the verge of overwhelm. I have already instigated or instituted self-care. I've pulled away. Like, there are more needs to be met within my family, and my children have had their end of year school things and their 5th grade promotion. And I needed to show up as mom. I needed to be present in my personal life, let alone the world falling around us, both personally and then at large. And I've seen a lot of people just kind of express this sense of grind in social media posts where they're like, mass shooting, we talk about legislation, nothing happens, we move on, it happens again, right? Like, we can see this cycle where we have this problem with mental health, with mass shootings, with people using violence to act out the brokenness in their heart, in our society, in racism in there's just so much, right? These issues are so big, and that's part of what happens with compassion fatigue is we feel hopeless. Like it just keeps happening. There's nothing I can do. My impact doesn't matter. So today I want to talk to you about a couple things that you can do for compassion fatigue that will help you to stay above the water and figure out how to navigate this, whether you're having a personal crisis like my family is right now, or you are an avid news watcher and you try to stay tuned in, or you are still feeling that depletion, that burnout from COVID, the lack of support, the lack of rhythms, the fear of losing people that you love. If you have, family members that are medically fragile or on immunosuppressants, they're still at risk, right? You still need to be wearing masks. You have different risk factors and levels. And so, the number one thing I'm going to say to you is take news breaks. I have some friends who, on their Apple smartwatches, they get like news alerts, CNN, Fox News, whatever. And so every time there's a crisis, their watch dings them. And I have a friend who I will see this and I'll see her kind of like take a short breath, like she'll look at her watch and she'll go, and I'm like, what is it? What happened? And she's like, oh, there's a tsunami in Asia. And I was like, friend, there's literally nothing you can do. Like if there's like if you want to donate to the Red Cross or something, but there's nothing you can do. And we don't know those people and we're not connected to them. But your body is experiencing the stress and fatigue of that loss, even though we have our own set of problems right here that we can impact and we can deal with. And I will remind you that if it bleeds, it leads. Okay, so there is motivation within the mainstream media to create news headings that pull on your heart, pull on your emotions in the negative, right? Not in the positive, in the negative. Because if you click on that, they can sell advertising. So they make money on your compassion, empathy, stress, fear, overwhelm, the need to know. They profit off of your pain. So I want you to see that from a much bigger perspective than, oh, I'm just really tuned in. I like to know what's going on in the world. So for me, that means I don't watch the news unless I did a story that I'm trying to promote something, because it's just negative, 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 negative. And it's also very divisive, right? Because if you can divide people, that creates heightened emotions as well. And that also sells, right? That sells advertising, that gets clicks. And so I realize that I'm not being given a holistic picture. I'm being spun into a way of thinking or fed a certain ideology so that I can get wrapped around a news story and the news cycle. I mean, and I saw this so Micah was killed and it made national news. And then the next thing that happened was a school shooting in Coral Springs, Florida. And so he died on Monday, and the shooting, I believe, was on Friday. And so there had been all this interest in interviewing me, because I myself have a story of trauma to share that pulls on people's hearts. And I really try to share that. That's why I'm a hope peddler. That's why I'm a hope caster, is because we can't live in the state of overwhelm, fear, helplessness, and survive, right? It's not possible to have those things with resilience. We have got to figure out how to transform, how to reframe our narratives in a way that makes us overcomers, that brings resilience through our lives and our stories. And so I might not watch the news for several days, especially when Micah died. There were major things that I missed. Like in Colorado Springs here, one of the things that we're connected with on the LETAC board that I'm on is the Devon Bailey shooting. I didn't really even know that had happened because it was relatively close to Micah's death. And I just had tuned out everything else because I couldn't take one more painful thing. So a lot of times I'm pretty attuned and I know what's going on. And I know, this is my news outlet that gives me a more balanced perspective. I'm not trying to be spun up. I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. I'm going to check and make sure that news story actually has something to offer me in the bigger picture. So you need to know what your news boundaries are. Okay. Another thing you've got to do for compassion fatigue, and I felt that especially like being in the hospital day after day for Chantel's surgery was I needed sunshine. I needed food that didn't come from the cafeteria. And I needed to step away from the large group of family members sitting in the waiting room so that I could be quiet with my own thoughts. There's some really beautiful gardens around the hospital there. So I went out and I just closed my eyes and I smelled my coffee and I felt the weight of my body in the chair and the sun on my face. And I did that. And other people didn't do that, right? It's like they couldn't leave that space. And I don't fault anyone for not doing that. But I know that if I don't take care of my body, if I don't pull away, if I don't leave the hospital environment, if I can't sleep for day after day after day, I'm going to get sick. Like I've just seen it happen, having lost Micah and the way that my adrenals responded. So yesterday I had a cupping massage appointment, right? And I mean, we're only like 3 days post-transplant at this point. And so that might seem a little bougie to really like, wow, like it's only been 3 days and she's already stepping out for a massage. Like if I don't get consistent care in the middle of crisis, it's going to build up and my body is going to break down. And so I know that even when it seems like I don't have time, I do have time and I have to make time. I'm going to encourage you to pick a person or a problem at a time. And so that means, like for me right now, Chantel is my priority. There's, the Buffalo shooting, the Uvalde shooting, our national crisis, monkeypox. You could get spun out about anything. But for me and my family, Chantel is my priority. And so I know that when I get asked to do other things, or would you do an interview for law enforcement right now? Or would you take on this speaking engagement? Or even smaller things like, oh, this, extra birthday party for my kids. I'm like, okay, well, that has to be weighed against Chantel being my priority right now. So I've really tuned out a lot on the Uvalde shooting. But within that, let me say to you that small things matter. We feel like if we can't solve the bigger overall problem, that our influence, our voice doesn't matter, that we are powerless. I still remember when Micah passed, getting a bag of quarters. It was the most precious gift. It was from a third grader somewhere else in the country. And she had written the sweetest little note. And she said, like, this is like my piggy bank money. And I'm sending it. And I'm telling you that impacted me so powerfully because she gave out of what she had. And people sent us cards, people sent us gifts, and we went through each and every one of those things and were touched by them. Now, did the people who sent them get to see how they impacted us? We tried to write thank you notes, but probably in a lot of ways they didn't. And so I could see in a way where they felt like, oh, we colored pictures for Levi and Eliana and it didn't really matter. It did matter. We looked through them, we kept them. We still have a book that has all of the cards and letters and pictures that we received that we can go back in times when we want to read and see how people have loved and supported us. So do not be afraid to give the small gesture, knowing that gives people the sense that they are not alone. That is one of the biggest things that's so hard in tragedy, is feeling like unseen. But when you do that small thing, you're showing them that they are seen. And that actually has this multiplication effect in their soul where it's like, no, I'm really not alone. Like Valentine's Day can be tough for me. And I've had friends send me flowers, right? And that seems like such a small thing. Like, oh, I just sent flowers. Like I can't fix that, she's widowed, that her husband is gone. The flowers were like, I see you. I love you. You are not alone. And they were powerful. So don't be afraid of picking one person or one, type of thing that you are passionate about, whether that's, animals or children or law enforcement or cancer or, some cause that's important to you and you're connected with. And then when you see those things pop up, that is you and you're going to do something. And that could be sending an email, sending $5 to their GoFundMe. Okay. Those things matter. And so that's another point that I have is have a plan in advance. Like decide what you're passionate about, decide what you can do. Know, okay, I have to keep my family running. I have to stay on my feet. If I'm out, my family's out, and then I'm not good to anybody. And so in advance what your skill sets are. So for me, I'm not a great person to run errands. That's not something that my brain does well. I don't organize strategically well. I struggle to do my own errands in my life. And so I'm not going to offer to a family like, hey, can I go do your dry cleaning? But there are other people can I take your dog to the groomer? Can I go get you some groceries? Those are going to be things that they are so good at, right? I know that for me, the public presence, the media, the interviews, that's something that I'm skilled at. That's a natural gifting for me. It's something I've practiced through public speaking and teaching and doing this podcast. It almost comes effortlessly, right? And other people aren't good at that. They don't want to be in front of the camera. They don't want that kind of frontline attention. But when it comes to the ability to have relationships with the press and to be able to speak out on an issue, that's something that I can do well. And so that's what I've been giving to my Flick family in light of what's happened to Chantel, to keep her story in front of people and to help people connect with what's happening on that personal level, right? Because when we see a global group that's suffering, that's way too much, but we can tune into the story of one person. And so I'm helping my family by telling Chantel's story of one person of heart transplant that they can feel connected to. If you happen to be in that place of immediate stress, let's say something's happening in your family and you're looking for people to support you, you want to communicate the needs and the wins, right? So you need to hear, like Chantel needs prayer for fluid in her lungs just as much as you need to hear she was able to walk today, she ate solid foods. Or yeah, she needs a transplant, but she got the right heart and it's in, right? So you find the way to acknowledge the wins, sit with the wins, progress over perfection. We're not trying to solve the whole problem at one time. There's no way that we are going to be able to solve the problem of mass shooting all at once right now, but we can reach out to the grieving families. We can donate to a GoFundMe. We can do that. And then you need to give yourself grace and forgiveness that you are not God. Okay. You are not going to be able to be all things for all people. You are a priority in your home, in your life, in your circle, in your workplace. You are a priority there and they need you. And if you try to be everything to everyone, you will burn out. You will have compassion fatigue, headaches, anxiety, health breakdowns. You will begin to dissociate. You'll feel numb, a psychic numbing or a numbing of your ability to connect with people. And it's going to affect all of your relationships. And so that's a really powerful piece of this, is to acknowledge the presence of a higher power, to realize that God is on the throne and that he is involved, that he cares, that he's intervening. Like, why would God allow my sister-in-law, my healthy sister-in-law, to have a heart attack? But this is her story and she's living it. And for whatever reason, God said, I'm going to allow her to experience this. And in the midst of that, we've seen miracle after miracle after miracle. God is still involved. Even in the loss of Micah, I could share with you for hours the things that God did for me and for my family and for my children, people who came to faith, who have hope, who became law enforcement officers because they want to be a part of the change. There are so many things that were a blessing that came out of great hardship, loss, and suffering. And so you have to remember that suffering is not our enemy. Suffering transforms us into more beautiful, tender, generous, benevolent, empathetic people if we let it. It can also embitter us, but it can make us resilient, powerful, tremendous overcomers if we allow it. Jesus promised that he would wipe every tear from our eyes. He promised justice. He promised to make it all right. He promised that he would come back and restore all that was lost. He promised to give us answers. Let me tell you that there is going to come a day of reckoning when I get to heaven and I see Jesus and we are going to have words and I'm going to ask him to tell me, why was all of this suffering worth it? And what lives were impacted because of Micah's death? And what lives were impacted because I sat in front of a computer and I spoke into a microphone to people that I didn't know, who were then transformed because of the message that I was willing to share? I want to know how my life was worth this loss and this suffering, because he says to us that we're so important. He gives a picture of that parable of the shepherd who has the 100 sheep. And the one runs off, the one's rebellious, the one is lost. And he says he leaves the 99 who are well and cared for and together and don't need his help to go rescue that one who's about to throw itself over the cliff. And that all of heaven rejoices more for that one who was lost and returned than all of the 99 who were stable and safe and didn't need that intervention. And so our stories, God sees us. He is in the midst of our pain. He sits there right there with us. He feels and experiences it all. None of the loss escapes him. He is not unkind. He is not unloving. He is not absent. When we are agnostic, we say, God exists, but we can't know him. No, this is a God who gave himself to be in a human body from a God presence from heaven to come and to die on a cross and to save us. That is not a God who is removed from us. You are listening to me here today. You are so loved. And God sees the big picture. He sees these tragedies. He sees Chantel. He sees all the families and the community of Uvalde that's been impacted. He knows the lives that were lost in Brooklyn. He understands the impact of COVID. And he's so big and he's so powerful. None of it overwhelms us. None of it overwhelms him. He says that he counts the hairs on our head. He knows the sand on the seashores. He knows how many stars are in the sky. Literally, he holds the world in the palm of his hand. This is how big and powerful he is. As far as the heavens are above the earth, so far are his thoughts above ours. And it's okay for us to surrender and to understand that we're not going to see it all this side of heaven, that our perspective is lacking, and that it's okay that we're in pain. We can take it to him. We can have community with other people. We can share our doubts. We can share how we don't understand how he would allow these things to happen, and still trust him, still trust his character. That is what has been such a powerful piece of my resilience story, is that God has shown up for me. And when Micah died, I knew that God was real, that he loved me, and that was it. Everything else was on the table. Every other thing that I had believed about my faith, about Christianity, I didn't know. But I believed that God is who he says he is, and he will do what he says he will do, and that God is good. And that he has a plan for our lives. Even if there is pain and suffering, that doesn't mean he doesn't love us. It means that he has a bigger picture that we can't understand, but that he promises to fulfill. And because our hope is in his character, and he can't lie to us, he can't be unfaithful, he can't disappoint us, we know that those questions will be answered. And so our work here on earth is to be faithful to one another and to be faithful to him. Everybody, this has been the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. I've loved being able to talk to you today about compassion fatigue and how you can protect your heart in the midst of overwhelming heartache, loss, tragedy, and trauma, and how we just keep getting hit with that in this news cycle day after day, honestly. And so I really hope that this message touches you, that's given you some tools, and that you can see, walking through my own story, how I have built this tool belt of resilience, and how even in this traumatic heart transplant with Chantel, we're walking this out one day at a time. And I'm using the exact tools that I am sharing with you to keep us on our feet, to keep us walking forward, to keep us in faith, to keep us in relationship with God and his big picture, and trust his intervention, his protection, his provision, even when we don't understand. Everybody, thank you so much, my friend. I'm so glad you were here today for this episode of the Hopecast. I hope it blessed you, and I'll talk to you next week on the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.
You've been listening to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. To find out more, go to rachaelflick.com. While you are there, you can book Rachael for your next speaking engagement. Her inspiring message will be sure to engage and touch the heart of your audience at your next conference, church event, or business function. Go to rachaelflick.com to book her today. While you're online, you can discover more information about all of the platforms that this podcast is on. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review. To follow Rachael on social media, simply click on the social media icons at the top of the page and you will be directed to those sites. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.